Okay, so this is the ACE session starting. If you have never seen the note wells, please check the note wells. If the first time you've seen those, take the time to read them. And if you have any question, just let me know. I guess it's not the first time. So we do have a minute taker. Watson has proposed to be the minute taker. If anyone is willing to help, I guess you're using the Etherpad, Watson. Am I correct?
That's correct. I'll be taking notes in the Etherpad. Feel free to hop on and clarify or catch stuff that I miss.
Okay, so anyone willing to help, would be more than welcome. So I'm wondering if Ben is present and if he wants to say something. Oh, I can see him. So I'm wondering if you want to speak now or if you want to speak a little bit after we've been through the working group status.
Let's wait until we're after the working group status, I guess.
Okay. Okay, right. So let's move to the working group status. So we had a bunch of drafts that are in the RFC editor queue. So some of them have been sent with some minor needs to be addressed. So I encourage the co-author to respond to the RFC editors. I mean, let's say within the 24 hours, the questions are coming. So I've seen some of them starting doing so. So keep on doing that, so that we don't stay with those drafts in the RFC editor queue for too long. Overall, I'd like to congratulate all the co-authors that have done the necessary to have all these drafts being passed. I think it's like we are turning one page for this working group. So what we have also for AD review is the AIF draft and the MQTT profile. And we have two drafts in working group last call. So that's the COAP EAP and the CMPV2. I hope this meeting is going to close those working groups last calls. So that's really the intention of that group. Now, assuming those drafts are going to be done and sent to the ISG soon, we have another bunch of draft that the working group should be focused on. So we have the key group com. So for this draft, we do expect to have a working group last call to start right after this IETF, and we're basically encouraging people to review. So we already had. So I can see the Jabber. So the data tracker does not seem to think that IEF is in AD review. So yeah, I have to check then. Is that the data tracker or the AD?
Sure.
We'll check.
We'll have to just check out offline.
Yeah, we'll see what is going down. Maybe not the right button has been pressed, but this is what we have in mind. So the other drafts, so the draft we are expecting some reviews is the key group com. So what I would like to check is who is volunteering to review this draft in the next few weeks. So Yeah, thank you, Signem. So Signem proposed to review this draft. I remember during the interim meetings, I don't know if Goran is present. Okay, so Goran is there. So we have 2 reviewers. The other thing I was thinking of is Francesca. I'm wondering if you would be able to, not that you get used to review every sort of draft, if you could have a deep review as if you were not the co-author of that draft. I think it could be useful still. So if that would be possible, that would be great. So we have at least 3 reviews. So yeah, please.
Yeah, I am checking document. Marco has taken a bit of the editor role now because I don't have time to drive it, but I have been following the document and the update. So I don't know how valuable my review is. Like obviously I as an author, I don't know that it makes sense for me to. I mean, any comment I have will be implemented in the document. So.
Okay, as you wish. I think it would be useful, though. That's but feel free to do. Right. So so it means I'm gonna kick off the working group LASCO next week. Then the other draft in the queue is the PubSub profile. So this is also one of the draft we do have that has a pretty high priority. So I think Signem is presenting that draft very soon. So basically, what we would like to understand today is how far we are from the working group last goal, and then we do have 2 drafts that are clearly not ready for working group last goal. The key group com OS core that needs some synchronization with the core working group, and the GM admin, which is the way I see that is configuring those more focus on the provisioning aspects. So we have 3 drafts altogether in the key group com. Marco is going to present that today. And aside this topic of group communication, it might be time to think of adopting a new document, and the one we had in mind was revoked token. So if time permits, Marco is also going to present those. And I think that's all. So I suggest that we continue to have those interim meetings so that we can make some significant progress with the drafts. And the other thing is that we should we are one working group, but we should not we should also consider that we do have other working groups like OAuth and YAP, or I don't know how to pronounce that, but so I would like that we do spend some sort of time to make sure that we are not isolating ourselves from other work being done at the IETF. So can I have just an idea of who is following those working group in parallel to ACE? That would be so. Please join the queue if you're following one of those. So I am hearing that I mean, we are not very closely following those working groups. So now that now that I have done with the working group status, I will let the floor to our AD.
Yeah, thanks for giving me the time. So I just wanted to sort of reiterate the thanks to all the authors and everyone who worked on the core cluster of documents. It's really great to be able to send those over to the RFC editor. I know that I was sort of part of the delay in that after the ISG review had finished up, and then I was just very busy with one thing after another and didn't get a chance to do the final look over and push the buttons to send them to the RFC editor. But I did that in the past couple of weeks, and it's very promising. So the next document on my list to review in the publication requested queue is actually the MQTT profile. So I expect in the next couple of weeks I should have something there as well. So thanks again, and it's great to have the core work done, and we of course still have more things to do for group communication and whatnot, so we'll keep busy with that. And over to the next presentation, I guess.
Yeah, so let's see, is it Dan or Rafael presenting?
Yes, this is Dan. So thank you very much. For starting, I would like to thank Mohit Sethi and Karsten for their review on the previous version that we used to improve, and based on their reviews, we are presenting now the last version of the document. So based on their feedback, we added well-known URIs for both entities, as the exchange has both of them at one point as server. We also changed the URI to conform to the IOAS scheme to provide the ordering warranty without resorting to any additional co-op option. We also added in that regard, with the current changes, some explanations about error handling. We were also requested to elaborate on the crypto suite negotiation. We have also done that. And also we explain a bit more in a bit more depth how the process of key derivation is done, and added the IANA considerations that were missing. So the next slide, please. So in this case, we are setting the URI to well-known /a, signaling the process of referring to the process of authentication that I understand that has to be assigned by IANA, but just a suggestion. So since the IoT device will always start with the first message as a client, we need to have this well-known URI also in the controller that is only for this first exchange, and in the for the rest of the exchange, the IoT device is the co-op server. But for the message number 2, we also need to have this well-known URI active. After that, the workings of the IOAS scheme to keep the ordering warranty comes into place. That is in the next slide.
So there is one question from Karsten.
Yes.
It's not a question, it's just a remark that I just had the battle with Mark Nottingham about getting /.reno and /rd. And yes, we finally got that, but be prepared for a little bit of discussion for getting Reno A.
Okay, it's the A that you,
Yes.
okay.
So no problem.
And which was the one you had some discussion with?
Well-known RD for the resource directory.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And A is kind of a rather unusual abbreviation of EAP, so I would expect that Mark will make a lot of noise that you should be using well-known EAP. But of course, Ben is right. We can always ask, but be prepared to have a second choice.
Sure, no problem. I understand that that is something that may not be up to us to choose. Yeah, understand.
The next slide.
So you please in the next slide. So the idea was in this case that once the server receives the first message from the controller, at that point it can create a resource in the co-op server, and that resource can be represented with any value that is to be assigned by the co-op server. We here put an example as /a/x, with x being the random value, but I understand that any value can be put there. There is no need to have this root with /a, something that I think that's something that the server can choose without any restrictions. And at that point, the co-op engine will take care of handling the retransmissions, the duplicate detection, and to handle error message when a message out of place coming from exchanges done before that are maybe arriving later due to network delays or whatever. Since the resource will be updated, a null message will be referring to a resource that no longer exists because it has already been processed, and we will be keeping the process moving along smoothly. So in the next slide, please. We are dealing a little bit with the case of what happens if a message out of place comes regarding the well-known URI, because that resource is going to be available always. So the thing is that when this message comes from the IP authenticator, from the controller to the peer, during an ongoing authentication, because it got delayed or whatever, what the IoT device, the co-op server, will do is understand that we are in the middle of an ongoing authentication, and as a signaling that it is not in its position to attend to that message, it would just send a reset message to indicate that there was some error. Okay, thank you, Christian. We will have that into account. Looking at some examples, I got the impression that the code was supposed to be 0.00, but we can update that. Thank you. We have in the next slide the other case, that is what happens when the well-known message arrives, but in this case from the IP peer to the authenticator because it got delayed. Because this message particularly is a non-confirmable message that also has the no response. If arrives during an ongoing authentication, the controller can just omit it without any further consequence. But in case it arrives during a time that the authentication has finished, then the controller doesn't have any additional knowledge about being a message out of place, and it will start a normal authentication process. But because the IoT device was not the one that started the process, it will also send a reset message letting him know that, okay, I need to be the one that starts the process with the first post sent by me, right? In the next slide, we are elaborating a bit on how we are dealing with cryptography negotiation. We had two options basically to create a new option specifically for this purpose, but we saw it that this was not the best alternative because we will be forcing all co-op implementations to be updated. I think that's not desirable. The other option was embedding the cipher negotiation inside the co-op payload. The problem is not a problem, but the issue is that currently we are carrying the IP messages inside the payload, so we need just to be aware of the structure of the message to be able to parse it correctly. But in addition, we also need to be aware of that we need to prevent a downgrading attack. So in the next slide, we explain how we understand that this could be done. So in the co-op payload, first is always the IP packet, and by its own structure, the IP packet tells its own length. So we should be able to parse it without any problem and without any additional overhead. And when we are finished parsing the IP packet, we will find a CBOR array with a list of the cipher suites that the controller is able to manage and is proposing the IoT device to choose from them for the process. So in the second message, in the answer, sorry, to the second message, the IoT device will answer with the choice of cipher suite, as we can see in another CBOR array. Next slide, please. Here are the key derivation process for establishing the OSCORE security context. We are deriving the master secret, the master salt, and also the recipient ID and the sender ID, all based on the MSK. We are using in the master secret and master salt what we call their CSO, that is the contents of the cipher suite negotiation. This way, we are binding the content that was exchanged. So if a downgrading attack is performed, the derived keys will not match, and the context will not be the same. Hence, the OSCORE negotiation will not be successful. We are setting the length to the maximum specification of the OSCORE RFC. So for instance, the recipient ID and the sender ID have a maximum length depending on the crypto suite chosen. We are specifying in length that we will use the maximum length allowed. The next slide, please. There we can see there the complete exchange in the current state. So there we can see how we are basically using the well-known URI in this case. We are concatenating the crypto suites in the second and third message. And additionally, we are adding in the message number 9, along with the IP success, some authorization information that is also concatenated, in this case with the session lifetime, for the IoT device to be aware when the keys will expire, so it can start a re-authentication process. We also elaborated a bit in the text about how can this be done, but I don't think that something so taxing that we can discuss here, but I think it's just interesting to mention that we did this, consider this addition. I think, I don't know if there is another slide there, or we just finished. Okay, yes, the IANA considerations. Thanks to Mohit that commented these details. We need to ask the IANA for assignment of the global identifier and also the assignment of the URI. And I think that's it. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, so I think you can start the procedure of I mean the negotiation with Mark of the URI,
Mhm.
and you probably can check with the IANA if your section is fine.
Mhm.
So while maybe some other people review the draft, because you need 2 weeks generally to get a response. So it gives us some more time for Christian to read the document again. And if anyone has a question or anyone wants to review the document, it's the right time, because this draft is going to be soon shipped.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a pretty simple observation. So you are designing a few new protocol data units here, like the set of cipher suites and so on. And just make sure that you design them in such a way that when you have to have the second version of this protocol, you have an ability to extend this. So you have something in the array or in the session lifetime that allows you to up a counter and say something different. So that would be my reaction to this presentation.
Okay. Thank you very much. We will try to have extensibility in mind.
Okay. My comment was sort of related to the EAP side of things, because the recent discussions in the EMU working group about IETF111-ACE-2021-0729-2200 sort of reiterated the importance of being able to think about the EAP state diagram, but also the that sometimes you need a protected indication of success or protected indication of failure. And in particular, we had to change the IETF111-ACE-2021-03 spec after ISG evaluation in order to add that protected indication of success. And it looked like on the ladder diagram that you had that the actual EAP success itself would be conveyed inside the inner payload of a OS core option, which seems to me like it would count as a protected indication of success. But I just wanted to confirm that there was not a risk of someone forging the EAP success.
Sure, yes. In fact, that was also our idea, to have the EAP success and all the authorization information protected with OSCORE, yes.
Excellent. Thank you for confirming.
Thank you.
Christian disappeared. So any other comments on this draft? Okay. Okay, so thanks for the feedback. I think that was useful. So as mentioned, I'm wondering if Moit is present and is willing to make a presentation of the CMPv2 draft. Oh, I can see Anas. No, so I was expecting to make to have a presentation on the second draft that is in a working group last call, but I don't have the slides, and the co-author does not seem to be here. So I suggest we move to the PubSub profile. Is that fine for you?
That's perfectly fine.
Okay. And Moit, if you're in the participant list, just show up and you will be able to present your draft.
Shall I start?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so in this presentation, I'm going to go over the changes that we've introduced with the third version of the PubSub profile after the IETF 110 meeting. Next slide. The document initially focused on how to authorize PubSub clients using the ACE framework, in the sense that authorizing clients to the broker, as well as protecting the message content from the broker, so establishing a security association between publishers and subscribers, focusing particularly on CoAP. And in parallel, we had MQTT TLS profile, which basically looks at token transport and PubSub client authorization, but it didn't cover the message protection. So we looked at how we can contribute the MQTT description to the to this profile too. In addition to that, in IETF110, I've presented a change to the architecture, which was accepted and got a go ahead for describing it in the document, and that's the major change that we've done to this document now. Next slide, please. So let me remind you what that change was. So formerly, we had in the architecture two authorization servers. One set up the security context between the publisher and the broker, and the other one was used to create a security context between publisher and subscriber so they can protect their communication from the broker. The AS2 kind of was a mixed AS. It also had the key distribution center responsibility coming from the group com. So for the AS1 publisher broker, we could use the token transport profiles like MQTT TLS profile, or the CoAP, for CoAP, the DTLS profile, or the OSCORE. And for the AS2 communication, we basically relied on the group com description. While looking at this and trying to understand how we could map to MQTT and some of the concerns raised previously by this separation of ASs, especially when the consistency of the policies that they have to work with might be a problem, we decided a new architecture where we have now a single authorization server, and a key distribution center and the broker are effectively acting as resource servers for these authorization server. Now, one for an implementer can decide to separate this to two separate ASs, but then the policy synchronization, like the decisions that are used to make to grant tokens to the publisher subscriber clients and their consistency is implemented as a choice, not as something by default that needs to be handled by the implementer. So that's what we're achieving by this single AS. With this, we basically also changed the authorization request a little bit. Before, there has to be two, of course, authorization requests respectively to the two separate authorization servers. Now there is a single authorization request, but for two audiences. So towards KDC and the broker. And the same token can be used to establish a secure, connection between the KDC, the broker, and make sure that the PubSub clients are authorized to the broker, as well as used to retrieve the keying material from the KDC to protect their communication while they are sending messages through the broker. Another thing that we have changed in the authorization request is that we've aligned the scope parameter to the way that it is defined now in the group com. So there is a better alignment with how things are described in group com and this document. And we've used the same definition of scope, where the scope can be an array of groups that the publisher subscriber clients can register to or join to, and then with what role, like whether they're a publisher or a subscriber or both. So it kind of is descriptive of what the clients are trying to achieve. And another thing that we achieved with this is that now, previously there was a distinction between publisher and subscriber clients, and publisher clients were expected to be authorized to the broker, and subscriber clients were not, because they need to get the right keys from the KDC to be able to read the subscription, the publications. So it wasn't found essential to authorize them to the broker. However, while this might be an overkill for some applications, we kind of chose to support the subscriber authorization by default and bypass it if it's not necessary, and allow subscribers to connect without authorization to the broker if the broker allows it. But that's left as an option, and it's not just the subscriber authorization is now supported by default. So these are the major changes that came with the architectural change. Next slide, please.
I just have a question. If you have one token and two audiences, I'm just wondering if there are any keys that are being shared.
The token, yes. So the secret that needs to be used to be able to establish the secure connection. Yes, so that is a single thing, and that might be something that needs to be discussed. But we thought, since it's the same set of policies that needs to be consulted to grant a permission to the publisher subscriber client, one to be able to publish or subscribe to a topic, and then to be able to encrypt or decrypt what is published to that particular topic, we kind of considered that is acceptable. But if there's a concern about that, I'm happy to rethink that and go for two tokens, two separate audiences from the same authorization server. But I would be happy to hear what would be a major concern for using two audiences and a single token.
Okay, I don't have any. It was just a clarification question from my side.
Okay, but this is a good point, and this is something that we would be very happy to receive comments. We were discussing with Francesca about this change as well, because this is one of the main changes that we've introduced as well, going to two audiences in a single token. And if there are any concerns that are found by the working group about this, we're very happy to hear and reconsider that decision. Next slide. Okay, so I just wanted to show how the protocol flows, and focusing on CoAP, but it's very similar to the MQTT case as well, where the client will be requesting authorization from the authorization server, get a token, in response. It will use that to establish a secure connection to the KDC, send a join request to the KDC. Here, the join request is to a group, and which is representative of a topic that the client is trying to publish. So we kind of have an equivalence between topics and security groups here. And then the client uses the same token to establish a secure connection to the broker, and typical PubSub operations with protected payloads using these keys retrieved from the KDC. The change, as I said, there is no joint authorization and join request to the AS2. They are now separated, and they are two separate requests now, an authorization request to the AS and a join request to the KDC. Next slide. MQTT specific consideration. I wanted to add this because this is a concern that I have raised in the previous meeting, where MQTT represents its topics in a tree, and then it can have topic names or topic filters that have wildcards in them. And these wildcards may span several layers in a tree. And then with these topic names, we kind of consider them as application group names. And after discussing with Marco, it was good to separate the application group name versus security group name, because the group communication draft, which this profile builds on, considers security groups as its main operational unit. So there must be a way for the clients to identify or map their application topics, application groups to their security groups. They have to discover that association. And in MQTT, a typical prefix used to publish that type of information is the $sys topic. And that can be used to publish broker-specific information. It's very widely adopted, very well known. Also, it is acknowledged in the MQTT specification as well. So this can be used to publish this kind of associations. Next slide. Now that this is published, the client can learn about these associations to be able to request the right token scopes, basically covering each security group that they're interested, mapping to the application groups that they want to communicate in. We've kind of considered the SIS topic as a recommended protected topic, but we are also acknowledge that it introduces another step, because you have to authorize to the AS to be able to subscribe to the SIS topic, and then learn the mappings, then go back to the AS, get your token upgraded to cover the additional groups that you want to communicate to, and then come back and retrieve the keys and etc. So that it requires a kind of another step to be able to get the token. Once the client gets the necessary mappings, the token request will have scopes covering each security group, and then the KDC will be receiving separate joint requests for each of the security groups that the client needs to be a part of. Now, of course, the publications will be protected with the corresponding key for the security group, and then the RS would validate whether that mapping is correct and it's represented in the token for the client. For the subscribe case, again, you can subscribe to filters, but we put the onus on the client to be able to separate those topics so that it's kind of maps to a single security group, so that the broker can reject a subscription request directly and not necessarily need to do computations about, how much of that topic is covered in that particular security group. So whatever filter you're requesting, it must belong to a single security group. So those are the considerations we've added. We've kind of put the work on the client to ask for the right things. So, but I think it's kind of a good trade-off at the moment to handle the topic filters that have wildcards. Last slide, please. Next slide, and that will be my last slide. So I think the draft is ready at the moment to be, with its final descriptions. There might be some tightening of language that is necessary, and we can push another version after. But then after that, I think we're ready for the reviews. We, of course, are interested in implementers and wanting to hear who would be willing to implement. And that's it.
Thank you. So I think Ben is willing either to comment or to implement.
I'm willing to comment. I wanted to go back to the topic that we talked about briefly a little bit before about the single token with multiple audiences.
Yes.
That I don't think it's inherently flawed in that we should look at it carefully, but I think there are some situations where it will make sense. But the security properties of how that works do vary quite a bit, depend on sort of what type of proof of possession key you're using in the token. Like if you're using a symmetric proof of possession key, that sort of intrinsically is falling into the cases that we disrecommend in the core framework. But if you're using asymmetric proof of possession and a signed token, many things work out fairly well. The other point I want to make, sorry, go ahead.
I think, yes, you're right. I think we have to describe it for both cases. And the ACE typically falls back to symmetric proof of possession keys. So in the main framework, so maybe describing it for both cases and giving it as an option might be a better thing. Or do you suggest to go to do tokens by default and then describe, and don't even bother describing to audiences?
I mean, I think that you're correct that there is enough overlap that it will feel natural in many cases to use the single token. So I do not propose to make the default be 2 tokens.
Okay.
But yeah, we probably will need to have separate treatment for the symmetric versus asymmetric case.
Okay, so that should be added to the draft.
Yeah, and then the other point I was going to make was that in the OAuth world, which of course is not doing proof of possession really. It's maybe not universal, but it's definitely commonplace to use a single token with multiple audiences. And I believe that there have been some, if not attacks, maybe weaknesses or security considerations that fall out of that. And I believe that the OAuth working group has documented many of those. And so we should probably try to find those and reference them if they are appropriate to here as well.
Okay, will do. Definitely. We need to add more to our security considerations anyway, so definitely add that to my list.
Thanks.
I'm just wondering, Anas, do you want to point some links that we should read that might be that have been commented by OAuth?
No, I wasn't. I wouldn't know which one I should share. I need to think about that.
Okay.
If
I mean,
there's
I think that would be helpful if you have something in mind.
Yeah, let me think about it.
Okay, thank you. So okay, so I mean, it's good that this draft is I mean, close to be done. There are some needs. I mean, that might not be only needs, but it seems the draft has reached a quite stable form. So I might be asking who would like to get a look at this draft in the, I mean, let's say in August or August, September. September, Marco. Yeah, that's good. Latest. Yeah, that's anyone else? I mean, you should not be shy. So feel free to get a review on this draft. I would like this draft to be sent in September. So please review that document. Then I think the floor is going to be Marco's floor. Yeah, I think you're going to start with the key group com and start with an overview of all this work. So
that's right. Hi, everyone. So yeah, before getting into the draft, I was asked by the chairs to give an overview of the GroupCon documents in ACE, how they relate to each other. And starting from the left, you see, in fact, key group com. It provides general message formats, procedures, and an API for a key distribution center to distribute key material to use for group communication. But then you need to have instances, practical instances as application profiles of this document. And we have two at the moment. One is the PubSub profile just presented by Sigdem. And the other one is key group com OSCORE that rather than PubSub, it considers group communication for co-op protected with group OSCORE as security protocol. And it essentially extends the API at the KDC, which is specifically an OSCORE group manager for joining nodes and group members. If you follow the flow to the bottom of the slide, this document also influences another one, GMadmin, which provides another interface to the OSCORE group manager, but intended for administrators to create, configure, and delete the OSCORE groups. And now if you move all the way to the top of the slide, you see that the security protocol group OSCORE is developed in core. And of course, what happens there influences very much both key group com OSCORE and to a smaller extent also GMadmin. So next slide, please.
So to me, but it might be only me. It's unclear to me what core is doing
it is defined the main security protocol used to protect the messages in the group. So in ACE, we are dealing with accessing the group in an authorized way and get the key material. Once you're in, you start using GroupoScore.
Okay. Okay, right.
Thank you. So I anticipated that at an interim we had in June, the GroupoScore document in core was undergoing some major updates that had an impact for sure on key group common score. But some things were so general that were actually better to be done in this document, as in principle relatable to all possible profiles of it. But at the end of the day, it was only about three things. Number one, we generalized the proof of possession of the joining node's private key. We were going just for a signature. Now it's more generally a POP evidence. It can, of course, still be a signature, which will be in most of the cases, but it's up to the profiles to specify what exactly it is used. As a second point, this is also in alignment with GroupoScore, with what is going on in the Lake working group with EDOC. We are still indicating the format of public keys used in the group with the PubKey parameter, but before we were sticking to raw plain cozy keys, essentially because it was simpler. We are now going for different possible formats that have to be selected, at least in terms of code points, from the cozy header parameters registry as preferable, and examples are certificates of some kind, CWTs, or unprotected CWT claim set. And the third point is related. We are not assuming anymore that the format of the public key in the group is also embedding the identifier of the corresponding node of the group member corresponding to that public key. And this is something actually that at some point Ben was hoping we could consider, and taking this alternative route, we ended up there anyway. So now we are just using a separate parameter that we had around all the time anyway, as optional to be used, peer identifiers. So in messages transporting public keys of group members, we also have a separate peer identifiers parameter, including the corresponding node identifier. Next slide, please. So yeah, the last submitted version basically implemented those three changes. I think this version is stable now again, and the working group of score is not 100% done in core. I expect one more round there, and consequently one more round in key group common score. But at the same time, I believe that shouldn't impact this particular document instead. So I believe this version 13 should now be ready for working group last call.
At least it's a risk the chairs of the core working group are ready to take. Any comment on that? I'm hearing none. So expect to have a working group last call for this draft very soon. Watson.
Thank you, Watson. The general case is that at any point in time, a group member doesn't know of what other group members are there. That's something they can learn querying the KDC for the current public keys in the group. More specific security considerations should come in the application profiles that instance this document.
I think that's a very big problem, because the application profile, then the application profile has to redo the analysis of what is this protocol giving them and what do they need. And ideally, I think in sort of big frameworks, you have security considerations that cover what applications will need. And the application profile then says, okay, well, we're responding to these sort of things we need to do, and we see that we have enough coming from the underlying thing, because otherwise you have a very sort of weak notion, you have very weak things here about when it comes to group communication. And so an application profile that needs something stronger can't use this, which is fine, but it needs to be documented.
Sure, another point is that this particular document doesn't consider any particular secure communication protocol, which also has to be defined in a separate profile. So probably there's not so much too specific that can be said here already.
Wait, okay, so it's not considering a specific security protocol. It's just considering the membership and handing out sort of identity keys to all the group members. So you're supposed to layer this with another group communication protocol on top.
Okay.
Well, I'm asking, I'm just really confused with sort of how managed, like, what are the properties you're getting from this draft?
It's just about key provisioning, and yeah, the details really depend on the secure communication protocols used in the group, and that's something that is not in scope for this particular draft.
So with
further.
Please go ahead, Watson.
Sorry about the audio drop. Okay, I am deconfused. This is just about sort of group membership. You're just getting handed something that indicates that you're a member of the group, and okay, and so that's fine. Maybe there's some text in the draft that I overlooked, or maybe there's something that should be edited to make it clearer. I'll take a look. But thank you very much for clearing that up.
Thank you, Watson.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I understand Watson's confusion. I had the same issue with the previous versions. Maybe that's because of the communication. So, okay. So Ben is saying in the chat that he was also a little bit confused. It's probably a title thing. Okay, so I suppose that we are all pretty clear about what the intent of the draft is, whether it is clear or not. Yeah, sure. And as Waxon suggests, we need to make to deconfuse that to have that very much clearly in the draft. So this is why reviewing is matters at that point. Okay, so now we've done with the key group com here. And now Marco is going to present.
I would have key group com Oscar, but I'm looking at the time and it's less than 2 minutes to go.
Okay, so which one do you want? OScore? The key group com OScore?
Yeah, that would be the next one. But
very sure. Next is going to be for the interim meeting.
Yeah, so there's definitely no time to go through the details update, but basically there were changes in the group OScore document in core, and the update to this document was about aligning it to the group OScore draft in core, and especially additional requirements and expectations of services that the group manager had to provide in that case. That involved parameters, proof of possession for the different modes supported in the group, and much stricter policies for rekeying the group and keeping the security properties of group of score fulfilled. So if you jump to slide 6, basically.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I expect one more update in the group of score document in core, and consequently one more alignment update here. Optimistically, if then everything becomes stable and there are no big issues newly coming up, this may be also considerable for a working group plus call at the next round.
Okay. So, and so the previous draft was about distributing the keys, and this one is about getting the keys based on OS core.
This one is an instance of the previous one, specifically to access groups where communication is protected with the group of score protocol.
Okay, so in that draft, we consider the communications between the members.
In this one too, once you are in the group, but the focus on the document is about getting the keys in an authorized way to enter the group. And the same is for every profile of key group com.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's basically getting the key using OS core.
No, the actual key fetching can happen with whatever transport profile of ACE between the joining node and the KDC.
Okay.
The particular thing of the profile is that you get key material to use into the group, in this case, for the group of score security protocol.
Okay. Okay, right. So it's to use OS core as a secure channel between nodes.
Once in the group of score between group members, yes.
Okay, good. I think we're a little bit out of time, so I'm wondering if anyone wants to briefly say something to conclude. I mean, if no one has anything to say, I wish you a happy IETF meeting and see you at the next interim meeting, probably in a month or two. Thank you. I'm going to adjourn the meeting.